So my name's Ted Woodward. I'm the technical director for the FutureG initiative, and I'll be telling you a little bit about what happened at the RIC forum that took place at the end of March. So move on to the next slide. Try that again. Yeah, so this was an event that took place in Dallas at the end of March. It was funded by OUSD R&E, the FutureG initiative, and executed in collaboration with the NTIA through their Institute for Telecommunication Sciences. And I'll be talking to you about what took place there. And the focus of the RIC Forum and the reason that we put it on was that while the horizontal activity, if you might think of it in terms of Open RAN, of CUs, DUs, and RUs, is a lot of what we've spoken about, it's the vertical segmentation in Open RAN that delivers the value to the operator. That's where the interesting, compelling applications are. And we really wanted to give the industry a chance to show off what the current state of that might be. The numbers, by the numbers here, you can see what was actually going on. It took place at the end of March. We had about 150 attendees. We also had a virtual participation. And I'll just mention that what you're going to hear from me today is substantially what I was asked to recount on the final day of the event as a closing remark. And I'll just mention to you that if somebody ever asks you to give a summary 24 hours after something has taken place, be very careful when you say yes or no to that, because it means you're going to have to pay attention. But nevertheless, this is what took place. You can learn a little more about it at these links. And the purpose, as I mentioned, is to sort of showcase the current state of applications that run on RICs and show the value that they provide. There were a number of different accomplishments that took place there. I think it was a very interesting event and really potentially a watershed moment for the element. For those of you that were present at the RIC forum, you probably heard a lot of what I'm about to tell you, but you at least get the benefit of visual aids now because we had some pictures. It was a very well-attended event, and it was very active. If you put 150 people in a room, all of whom are desperately interested in a particular topic, it tends to be very active, and in fact, that was the case here. The showcase element of the forum was 10 real live demonstrations of XApps and RApps operating on RICs in live networks, delivered right in front of the audience. We had 10 of these that were presented, along with 8 lightning talks from folks that also had sort of interesting things to talk about, but we didn't have time to give full demonstration for all of them. So you can see them listed here. And what I'm not going to do in this talk is recount what each of those did. You can learn more about that from the website. What I want to try to do is look at what happened. Were there any common themes? What emerged that I saw and heard more than once that I thought might be interesting to share? So there were a few of those that came out to me, and I'll just share them with you here. And the first impression that I had is, wow. It was an impressive set to see 10 real live demonstrations running over the course of those 2 days during a live event. And these are just exemplars of that. These were real, they all worked. They didn't all necessarily work the first time, which tells you that they were real demonstrations and not canned demonstrations that people were running 100 times. So this is just one example of that, but I thought that was very impressive to see that. Not too many times that you're going to go to a meeting and see people run real demos on real networks live. Using real networks and real data. So I thought that was, that was impressive. Another impression that I took away from this was that the standards-based framework that we have established in the industry now really provides a streamlined pathway for innovation to move from demonstration to production, particularly for our academic community. So they're innovating not on some custom version of a network, but on an Open RAN network that's conforming to E2 interfaces and implementing in a way that is quite compatible with what the industry might want to ultimately do. And that was apparent a couple of times. The other thing that was apparent is the accelerated pace of innovation, the XApps and RApps. This was pointed out in a number of the demonstrations that the use of the open source code base and the use of real network data, the availability of that information greatly speeded the ability to create these XApps and RApps by a large number of contributors. And I thought that was worth noting. I think it's a question for the industry, for all of us, how we're going to drive that harder. And we talked a lot about that today. There was a little bit of mention earlier in the day about access to network data, and I find that to also be very encouraging, because in many cases it was pointed out that access to real network data was very important for developing the XApps and the RApps, particularly those that included machine learning and AI. Another thing that I took was the exposure of new ideas during the course of the demonstrations, which is not something that I had necessarily expected to take place in this kind of a forum, but we did see some of those. In particular, I found it very interesting to hear discussions of dynamic service models as opposed to the more static, specifically developed use case specific service models that would need to be created to be able to do these kind of things dynamically. Was sort of an interesting thing to hear about, and we saw that demonstrated. Another interesting observation I took was the emergence of potentially new dimensions of competition. From multiple of the demonstrations, there was discussion of the RIC platform on which the XApp or the RApp that was being illustrated was created. And there was discussion about the features of those RIC development environments and the value and the ease with which an application developer could operate in those environments. And I begin to perceive a new dimension of competition, which is you're going to compete for the developer to operate in a given development environment. It's like, oh, come and work in my development environment. It's really good. And I think that's an interesting potential new dimension of competition in this space. We also saw new frontiers begin to get exposed, specifically the coupling of different applications together in a given environment. When we put forward our solicitation for the RIC forum, we talked specifically about our interest in seeing energy saving and traffic steering applications. What we didn't really expect, probably we should have, was that in fact people would use traffic steering to achieve energy savings. So the two use cases were coupled. But you can also envision richer and more complex couplings between different applications. And so if you're building an environment with an SMO framework where you're going to host multiple XApps and RApps, you're going to need to be thinking about the interrelationship of all of those applications together, which opens up a whole new dimension of complexity to deal with, particularly when those applications may be developed by third parties, different third parties. So I think we can expect to see more of that. And then, finally, perhaps a new fact of life, that many of the demonstrations that we saw were not what you would call simple application demonstrations. They were far from straightforward. They were rich, data-rich, utilized machine learning and artificial intelligence to deliver complex value propositions. And pretty rapidly, you can envision that when a vendor produces that capability, they run quickly to their customer to show it off. The customer finds that to be very attractive, and that becomes table stakes now. Every RFP you're going to see is going to ask for that. And so that's going to become progressively more and more complex, and if you want to stay in this game, you're going to need to be able to do that. And that puts a lot of pressure on an in-house development team. And now, in the resource competition, for where those resources are going to go, you might rather be investing in those complex applications. You might need to pull in external support for that. You might drive a strong driver for open interfaces and probably a strong driver for open source resource sharing. So I found that to be actually rather encouraging observation that we saw a couple of times. So then, as just a wrap up here, to me, it just seemed like a watershed moment for Open RAN and the RIC to see all of those things running together. Very impressive. And the reason that we find that interesting within the DoD is that we are a consumer of specialized applications, which can really only be possible in a RIC-enabled Open RAN environment. So I thought it was a very interesting set of discussions, and hopefully you guys are able to take away a few insights here. And if you're interested in discussing it further, be happy to take a discussion. So thank you very much.